It looks like, could it possibly be? Yes, we are live. What's happening, everybody? I hope everybody's having a fantastic whatever day you're watching this. If you're new to the channel, welcome. This is my little slice of YouTube, typically talking motorcycle stuff, sometimes car stuff. Basically, it's a background noise generator. So, big shout out to my folks that are out there driving the trucks, running the machines, you guys that are out there mowing your yards, hanging out, whatever you might be doing. And if it's just going to be me hanging out with you while you're crashing this evening, because there's actually guys that'll put me on in the background to have background noise while they're nodding off. So sweet dreams, my friend. So at any rate, checking in with you guys, not a whole lot going on in terms of the motorcycle sphere. There's just not a lot to chat about right now, outside of the fact that you've got, well, the Harley Davidson releasing the 883 Sportster. Pretty cool. Where's the 1200, which is what a lot of guys are asking. But outside of that, as far as new releases, well, at least in the States, we're left a little bit wanting right now. The GSXR 1000 is slated to show up in showrooms here in about the next 60 days. So sometime around June, late June, early July, maybe even August. We'll see. But pricing still hasn't been released yet on that bike. And speaking of that bike, there's a lot of folks that have been a little bit, I don't want to use the word concerned, but hear me out on this. The old GSXR 1000 was so good at being motorcycle. And what I mean by that is it's a sport bike that has rider aids and it's got lean sensitive stuff, but you'd never pick up on it by riding it. One of the beautiful things about the GSXR 1000 as it was that in A1 mode, even though there could be some throttle limitation on the side of the tire, whatever the case might have been, you never picked up on it. And the bike was always extremely natural feeling to ride, more so than some of the other bikes in the field. The Honda CBR 1000RR is one of those bikes that never really felt exactly right. The R1's pretty good, but it had its own fair share of nanny intervention. At least it was more prevalent. At least you noticed it more. Whereas the GSXR 1000, yeah, wasn't quite there at all. So I guess where I'm going with this is that the GSXR purists, the true leader bikes among us, well, this is one of the reasons why so many of us are looking at that bike and taking away whatever else is going on with that machine. It was the riding of that bike that was so good. And I think there's a lot of guys that are a little bit worried that those nannies are going to be a little bit more noticeable. We don't know yet, though. We don't have an American spec bike to take out and go for a ride on yet. But I can tell you this, once one becomes available, I will be throwing a leg over it. Unfortunately, I won't be able to run it as hard as I would like. Realities of laws and things. But what I will be able to do is give you guys some impressions, at least from an AB perspective, to some of the other bikes that I've ridden, which do have very prevalent nannies. But that's not to say that all of these bikes have nannies like that. So what I'll do is I want to talk to you guys a little bit about where I'm at with the R9 and why I think that bike, especially once it's done, well, I guess now for the second time, and in about 6 months for a third time, why that bike may end up being the absolute best bike that you can spend money on. And you can really spend money on it, especially you're going to love that bike if you're allergic to cash. Let me drop in with you guys real quick. Jerry is in, saying back from dumpster diving in DC. Nice. Need to catch up with you, man. Bruce is checking in and said, I'm the one in bed listening until I fall asleep, then rewatch the live in the morning. Sweet. So winking, blinking, and nod, my friend. But so here's the thing, guys. One of the funny things about the R9 that I'm noticing, and by the way, if you have an R9, it's going to end up in a bunch of pieces at some point, only because you'll be sending the ECU off and you'll be putting a new exhaust on the bike. So anyway, there's that. Oh, I didn't finish up the normal intro. So let me get back to that. Guys, listen, if it's your first time hanging out on the channel, this is my opportunity to interact directly with you. That's what I'm doing over wherever it is in the chat. So if you want to know something about bikes that are in the fleet, upcoming projects, stuff that I've got going on, now's the opportunity for us to hang out and I can literally interact with you directly. The main reason for that too, and I like doing that, is because a lot of times in the comments, I don't see the comments. There could be something going on with who knows what. I just don't get the notification. I try to answer as many of the comments as I can. If not, at least acknowledge that I saw you on there. I'll give you the heart, let you know that I saw you. But this is my opportunity to interact directly with you guys. So there's that. It also gives me an opportunity to give you guys a little bit of a peek behind the scenes and let you see what I'm up to on the other side of this wall over here. And we may be doing that. Well, I know there's not really much to see right now other than an R9 and a bunch of pieces, what we are going to be talking about here in just a second. Jerry's saying Yamaha should sell the R9 disassembled to save the buyer some work. DM is checking in. Good evening, B and chat friends. Got the ball guy with the flex and the specs. Pilo's in. So check this out. Funny you should mention it like that. It's basically a hobby kit, right? Like it should come in a box, you know, and like you could pop the things out like a model kit, you know. Oh, wait, here's my handlebar. Here's my wheel. Anyway, it's one of the funnier things about the R9, but it's one of the crazy things about that bike. And I've been doing a ton of, and it's on the other computer, so I can't really dive in. I don't even know if I can do a screen share, but been doing a whole lot of math. I got, you know, like totally snuffed into one of my my Excel spreadsheets that I always seem to be coming up with. And the funny thing is that the R9, when you do the whole comparison thing, you know, with gear ratios versus engine torque versus RPM versus mile an hour and doing all this other kind of stuff, it's funny because everything in the numbers, it almost plays out identically to how that bike runs in the real world, where it is that the R9 feels like fifth and sixth gear are like double overdrives. Matter of fact, the R9, when you take the step down ratio into account, which is the difference between the engine RPM and the actual transmission RPM, or the clutch RPM, if you will, it's like 1-to-1, which is unheard of in motorcycles. To give you an idea, a GSXR 1000 is 1.24 or something like that. So even in the 1000s, there's more gear multiplication in some of the later gears. I guess the point to all of this is it's kind of interesting when you're messing with a bike like the R9, because you start to look at it and you go, oh, wait a minute. It's got practically identical gear ratios, all things taken into account, for first through fourth gear. And then you get into fifth and they're almost like not really an overdrive, but then you've got sixth gear, which really is like an overdrive, which is funny because with all the grunt and all the torque that CP3 engine makes, it just motors along. But it's interesting that it can have that much power, that much grunt, even by being laden, because it has to. It's RPM limited with such long gears, if you will. But anyway, the more I've been diving into that bike, the more that I am leaning into putting cams in it. And the reason for that, so Crower just came out with their latest set of camshafts for that bike. And I've already reached out to one of my local dealerships. They can handle the teardown. It's not, and this is the thing, this is going to drive me nuts that I won't be doing this myself, but I literally don't have the tools to do it, nor the time. It's one of the, if like you were to hand me the engine, I would dive right in the middle of it, but I just literally don't have the teardown ability right now. So that being said, shop's going to do the work, but the cams may end up getting ordered here in about the next, I don't know, 6 to 8 months. We're going to put the bike back together in its absolute best possible form with stock camshafts. We're going to put it up against the GSXR 600. That's going to be a rough race for the R9. I'm just going to tell you right now. And then we're going to put it up against the GSXR 750 just to get a baseline for the R9 before it gets camshafts, because I can already tell you what's going to happen when you put Smokey up against that R9. So that being said, let me check back in with you guys. Make sure we checked in with DM. We did. Pilo's in. And Pilo's saying buying easy to assemble kit sports bike would be really cool. I think it would be too. I've never bought a crate bike before. I've actually been curious to see if I could do that. Sharp's checking in and saying, what's up, B? Saying 6 more days until the Isle of Man TT. I know, dude. By the way, speaking of watching racing, I am obsessed with watching Moto America Super Sport and World Super Sport racing right now. And it's not because I've got the R9. It's just because it's been some really good racing lately. So check that out. Pilot's asking, what would cams net you? I'll put it to you like this. So I just saw Jerry's. I like the optimism that it'll be around 6 to 8 months. Because Jerry knows me, it'll probably be more like 6 to 8 weeks once the bike's up and running. Depends on how far out they are in cams. So here's what cams get you. With this is a very frustrating characteristic of the R9. It's just like any motorcycle, there are a host of compromises when you're putting together powertrain, chassis geometry. Basically, everything is a compromise. There is no perfect. There's always some give and take. And when it comes to the CP3 engine, in a sport bike, there's a little bit to be desired. And that little bit to be desired is in follow through and over rev. So let me explain it to you like this. If you have an engine that makes peak power at, say, 10,000 RPM, that doesn't mean that that's its peak accelerative torque production, right? Because what happens is if that horsepower curve is going up like this, and then it flattens out, but it just flattens out, and you've got a how do I say this? You lose that ramp effect, and the more plateaued it is, you're not really accelerating there. In fact, you are you've got a decaying torque at that point. So what the idea is to then shift where you see the torque curve start to decay, where you see the numbers really start to fall off quick. Anytime you see a plateau or a very shallow curve, you're decaying torque. So what can happen is you can literally have an engine that makes peak power at 10,000 RPM, but your shift point is going to be at 9,000. Because if you try to carry it out, that's really nothing more than a glorified over rev, okay? That's not a bad thing because you've got all this grunt that you can take advantage of. It's just that you have excess RPM that's not really doing anything. That's where the CP3 engine is. And by the way, this is not only the CP3's thing. Most of the V-twins that you'll ever ride are like that. Except for maybe the Testa Strada from Ducati, my RC51 was like, in fact, the RC51 is identical to the R9 in terms of power output. 118 horsepower and about 72 pound-feet of torque, which is what you would expect to get out of a piped and tuned R9, right? Soft limiter at 10.5, limiter at 10.5, peak power at about 10, peak power at about 10. See what I mean? Even though that's a V-twin, it doesn't really matter. The way that the cylinder head is designed on the CP3, it's designed, and that engine was hatched to basically give you like parallel twin or V-twin torque, but with the smoothness of a triple. And it's something that you can't really bake into the cake of a 4-cylinder. It doesn't work like that. Try as you might, it's very difficult to do. Kawasaki has tried to do that with the older Z900 RS engine, and it just didn't, it never really played out the way you'd think it would. especially from a smoothness point of view. So if you think of the CP3 not as a triple, but as a twin, which is kind of how it goes about business, then it makes sense. And when you look at the cylinder head flow, you see that it's designed for high velocity. It's designed to have a lot of mid-throttle punch. It's designed to make a lot of grunt, but it's not designed to make horsepower. Horsepower comes from RPM, and you've got to be able to turn the engine and keep producing a flat torque curve. A flat torque curve is good because a flat torque curve means horsepower is going up. It's only when torque drops that horsepower starts to drop along with it. Horsepower is a function of torque, not the other way around. So what the camshafts will do is it will allow the bike to breathe for about another 1,000 RPM, which doesn't sound like much, but it is a lot. And in this case, it's another 10%. And to be fair, you're going to pick up about almost that percentage in power. So what exactly does that mean? Okay, so on Two Wheel Dyno Works dyno, the bike right now would make about 118 horsepower. On more Mafia's dyno or V-Cycle Nut, it would be putting down about 120, 121, right in there. Camshafts are going to bring power up to about close to 11,000 RPM, which means actually closer to like 10.5, and I get about another 1,000 RPM of over rev, but it keeps the acceleration ramp strong. Out to that 10,500 RPM point where it had already started to flatten out. So it works out like this. The number doesn't sound big, that 10 horsepower number, but in motorcycle terms, that's gigantic. That's like a car picking up 60 horsepower. So, and it picks up all of the over rev, and it allows me to extend gears further as well, which the bike needs, because although it's got long legs, it doesn't have a lot of RPM to be able to carry mile per hour. So it helps in a lot of different ways. But the most important way that it helps it is that now it's going to act like a triple. I want my triple to do triple things. I don't want my triple to do twins things, which is what it's doing right now. Now, this is going to be expensive, but it's still going to make the bike less expensive than a KTM or a V2 Panigale, and it will mollywop a KTM when this bike gets a set of cams in it. So all the way around, I think it's going to be the right thing to do with the bike. As Jerry has put it down here, maybe it'll be 6 to 8 months, maybe 6 to 8 weeks. Will depend on, it'll all depend on how the bike does when we do the head-to-head versus the 600. I already know it's going to happen against the 750, but it'll act as a baseline. Skid's saying, good evening, B. I got the ball guy with the flex and the specs. Ply was saying, would you say a car 650 is always trying that? Oh, CBR 650 is always trying. What did I miss? CBR 650, not my favorite bike. I like the bike. I just don't like the E-clutch. Matt saying, I want my triple to look good, sound good, and feel good. Tell you what, you get that with a bike with a pipe and tune, that's for sure. Matt saying, and will give me the fizz, as James May says. I tell you what, the cams, once they go into the R9, I have a really strong feeling that that is going to be just what the doctor ordered for that bike. And again, it's going to allow it to have the over rev that it just doesn't have now. And quite honestly, it's going to be able to do what I kind of wanted the bike to do to begin with, which is to not necessarily be a replacement for a GSXR 750, because it ain't going to be that. But what it'll allow that bike to be able to do is to be the best jack of all trades sport bike that I believe money can buy. And once you put a tally on this bike, and I don't count tunes and pipes, by the way, that or mirror block offs or tail tidies or any of the, the vanity stuff. I don't count any of that in this equation. But once you start to take into account the 190/55 rear tire, which I think is going to make a big difference on that bike, and the cams, you're looking at a total spend still of about $1,000 less than the KTM. And by the way, that's not including if you wanted to get, and that's with the KTM with the track pack, but and with the slip on, by the way, which is how you'd get the bike anyway. But that does not include having to pay the 2,000 whole ass dollars for the exhaust to go onto the KTM and the actual reflash you would have to get for that. Here's the deal. The KTM ends up being leader bike money by the time you get it sorted out. And I don't mean like a little bit of leader bike. I mean legit leader bike to the tune of about $16,500. So believe me when I tell you, the R9 will be able to do everything more comfortably. It'll sound better. And I think it'll be a more capable bike, at least in my hands, because I didn't really feel all that comfortable on the KTM. So there's a lot going on, but that's just to answer the question. That's what that set of cams will help out with. Pyro is checking in. I was saying autocorrect. Yeah, autocorrect will sneak up on you. Pyro's asking, do cams lower engines' life expectancy? No, they don't. Neither do big bore kits. So here's the thing. No, cams don't affect anything in that respect, provided that you're keeping the engine within a known window of RPM and you're keeping everything within a known window of load. No, they don't hurt anything. The only thing that hurts engine life expectancy is lack of maintenance. The CP3 especially, any GSXR engine, these things run practically indefinitely as long as you maintain them on some kind of level. But no, they don't really hurt anything. In fact, running an engine hard doesn't hurt its life expectancy. Again, as long as you are maintaining that engine, you're doing exactly what it was engineered to do. Same goes for big bore kits. You got to remember that for the most part, big bore kits, cams, or anything like that, unless we're talking about a spec race fuel for a race bike that is going to see piston speeds that you couldn't normally encounter on the street with street gas, it's really, we're talking about two completely different critters here. So let me give you a perfect example. We can talk about like race versus street when we're talking about engines. So typically, like a race engine, you're running a spec fuel, much higher compression, usually around 13 to 15 to 1 compression, minimum, by the way, for motorcycles. You're running camshaft lift and duration, completely different pistons. The only thing that really will be remotely the same between the bikes would be like the block, you know what I mean? But there's so much more that goes into the race engine than what goes into a street engine, and they don't need, you're using different piston rings, you're using all kinds of different stuff in a race application. Of course, it depends on the kind of race. Is it an endurance race? Is it a sprint race? Is it a qualifying engine? A lot of differences, right? But you get the idea. No, cams for a street engine like this, what I'm looking to do long-term with the R9, no, ain't gonna hurt nothing. That engine is already so under stressed as it is. I'll put it to you this way. Even with cams, that engine is going to be considerably under stressed. It's only, what is it, like an 11 1/4 to 1 engine in terms of compression ratio? That is criminally low, honestly. Like that's another thing. I mean, I was even thinking about this. I was like, man, should I just do drop-in pistons and do a thin head gasket, bring this thing up to around 12 1/2 to 1 compression, And then it's like, okay, well, if I do that, I need to go ahead and just have the heads ported. And then it's like you go down this real slippery slope. And at some point, it's like, no. This is not a race engine. This is a street engine. And so keeping it stock compression, don't even worry about cracking the case. Doing cams on this bike is really nothing more complicated than adjusting the valves. Honestly, there's not a whole lot that separates the two procedures, right? It's just a different level of teardown. So, it's you're not hurting anything. But again, the CP3 is so understressed that, I mean, it kind of makes you wonder why they didn't do this already, or what is coming down the pipe. And that's the other thing. There was, at first, I was thinking about this. I was like, should I go ahead and go through with this? Because the thought was, am I even going to like the R9 enough to keep it? Right? I mean, let's be honest. I was the R9's, you guys have heard me say this in videos, but I was the R9's biggest antagonist. And now that I've ridden it, I really like it. There are some things that I want to change about it. It's kind of weird. I'm looking at that bike now just with from a different perspective. And so I don't mind spending the extra money on the bike because it is going to make it a better bike. However, one of the other things that I was complaining about, or at least a concern, I don't know if it was really ever a complaint, is what's going to happen to the R9 in like maybe 4 or 5 years? Is there going to be an R9 version 2.0 that already has cams and, revised cylinder head and all this other stuff that would pretty much make a cammed early model R9 obsolete? It kind of makes you wonder, right? So I'm looking at this from that perspective as well. Will I do cams? It's in the plan, but sometimes there is a little bit of mission creep with that. And I have a feeling that once the bike is finally wrapped up and we've got the DNA air filter stage 2 thing, which who knows when that's going to make it to the party. The computer's already on the way back from Two Wheel Dyno Works. We've got basically to play the waiting game. The weather's got to clear up anyway, so it's not like I can ride the bike anyway. So no harm, no foul. Once everything gets wrapped up, start making some determinations once that bike is underway. Because it does bother me a little bit to think that, man, I would put all this time, effort, and energy into an R9 only to have the new R9 show up, which is already, making more power than my cammed R9. Wouldn't that be great? Anyway. But such is life. And I got to say, I don't think that it wouldn't be heartbreaking. Here's the other thing too. In saying all of that, could there be another R9? I don't think that there will be. And let me explain to you why. If you revise the R9 for it to be able to rev higher, for example, the issue that you run into is you are mechanically RPM limited with the R9's engine architecture. It simply can't, because of metallurgy, you can't rev it out to like 13 or 14,000 RPM. Not with the internals that it's got, and not with what you would consider to be commercially available components to keep the cost of the thing in check. So when you look at it from a bean counter's point of view, you just don't see a reason to allow for upgrades on that bike, because at some point the juice ain't worth the squeeze. An engineer is going to look at it and go, I can't turn the thing past 11,500 RPM realistically. On pump gas, no, it ain't going to happen. There's no reason to revise the cylinder head if it's already making the power that you need it to make. And even if it made another 10 horsepower, it wouldn't really matter. So no use in developing that. And it's not like people aren't buying the R9 because it's weak, right? I mean, there's waiting lists still to this day to get an R9. So I don't know. At first I was concerned that there was going to be some level of a update, upgrade, or whatever. But now that I'm looking at it a little bit more from a business point of view, if there is ever going to be an update, it would probably be in the form of a little bit better flowing cylinder head. And then at that point is, okay, does that cylinder head bolt up to the old CP3? Oh, it does. Put the cams in that. Let's see how it runs. I was saying I can see the R9 getting the same treatment that the R7 got this year. I tell you what, that R7's a damn good looking motorcycle. And although not necessarily for me, I can see where a lot of folks, a lot of younger folks, a lot of smaller guys and gals could find themselves falling in love with that bike. And I'll tell you what, I had so much fun on the MT-07. I mean, come on, y'all, let's be real. I mean, that engine platform is really good. Not again, only because, you know, I'm kind of by power requirements, I'm a bigger dude that just doesn't fit on the bike, so to speak. But I did ride it and it was fun. And I even said at the time when I rode the R7 that if I was getting started in track days, you know, I don't know that I would want another bike to, you know, to usher you into, you know, get you into novice class, get you used to being on track, get you into the C group, get used to being on the side of the tire, progress your way through that for about a year, get really good at it the first year, get competitive with it the second year, and then move up. I think that would probably be the route that I would have taken with that bike. But that is your R9 news. And I'm looking forward to, again, getting that thing back on the road. But even if the thing was together, I couldn't ride it right now because of the weather. Now, if we're talking about predictions of, you know, R9 versus the world right now, well, I got to say, I don't really know where to take this. The R9, with it being piped and tuned, but that's it. Stock cams, 190 tire, which it needs. It's going to be a tough race up against the GSXR 600 piped and tuned. And you might go, well, how do you figure? Gixxer 600 makes less power, a lot less torque. How is that really going to play out? Well, let's go about this by the numbers, shall we? So when it comes to horsepower is kind of a funny thing because horsepower doesn't care what your feelings are. It doesn't care what the size of the engine is. It only knows airflow, and that's it. And with airflow comes the horsepower, right? And the funny thing is that the GSXR 600, even though it doesn't make the engine torque that the R9 does, it's got a lot of gearing advantage. In some cases, it's got about a 25%, actually more than that, but we'll go with that for just now. Just roll with me on this. It's got about a 25% gearing advantage, which is to say that whatever torque that it's making, you divide it by 0.75, and that's what you would get for your actual twist equivalent. So what does that mean? Well, busting out my trusty calculator, if I can pull it up here, yay, I'm successful. So let's say that, what does the GSXR 600 make? 45 pound-feet of torque? 45 divided by 0.75, it comes out to 60 foot-pounds of torque, right? Would make sense. I should have known that off the top of my head. But it's not just that, because you've also got the equivalent in horsepower that you're going to be putting down. And keep in mind that the GSXR 600 can rev to 14,000 RPM. So 10,000 RPM divided by 14,000, let me say 10,250, just for argument's sake. Let's call it 10,500. Let's give that R9 some love. Divided by 14,000. Would you look at that? 0.75. So if you take 600 divided by, guess what, 0.75, any guessers as far as what that's going to be? It's got the equivalent of 800 cc's if you are adjusting 600 cc's for RPM and all of that. This is how you would come up with like fueling requirements and stuff like that. It's how I used to do the car stuff back in the day. So you go, okay, well, the 600, whatever adjusted, it's still 800 cc's versus 890. You're right about that. And we're also taking into account gearing as well, right? So we had 25% shorter gearing. We've got 25% more RPM. We've got an 800 cc equivalence. But here's the twist. This is where the close comes into play. It's a 4-cylinder. And a 4-cylinder is going to have more power strokes per engine revolution, right? So you've got 1.5 power strokes on a triple, and you've got 2 power strokes per revolution on your 4-cylinder. Again, it's got 25% more power strokes, so it's gonna be close. You could make a real strong argument that the 600 could gun down the R9, even though the R9 is in the shape that it's in because of gearing, especially the higher the speed goes, because 5th and 6th gear on the R9 are just like forever gears. So when you look at it from that point of view, the 600's got some advantage points, and it's got a whole lot of things that are going to equalize it, not to mention the kind of the party trick that my 600 has is that I have the strongest GSXR 600 that I have ever ridden in my life, sitting right on the other side of that wall. Strong enough to where I've even wondered if that bike does have a thin head gasket, because the head has been off of that bike before. I am truly curious as to, did the bike get a thin head gasket? Is there something else going on with this thing? Because that 600 is a heathen by comparison to other 600s that I've ridden. And that's not a bad thing. It's kind of a compliment to the R9 if it can hang with the likes of my 600, which, by the way, does not have any problem handling its own in its own environment, if you will. So it's a great bike, fun bike. And to be able to match the kind of performance that the 600 has, all the same time being able to give you a big old grin on your face, getting a handful of torque, that's kind of okay in a way, because now I've got a bike that acts. Remember what I was talking about, the RC51? So the R9, even though it's a triple, and the KTM, and really the Ducati, because it is a V-twin, but these bikes are the V-twins of the modern super sport era. The GSXR 750, which only runs in the States, and the ZX Moto 820, which only runs overseas, those are your 4-cylinder variants. You do have the 675 and the 765 that are homologated. Every once in a while, you'll see a Honda running around. Nobody's campaigning a Gixxer 600 in that class. So, again, when you look at it from that point of view, it makes total sense. And I'm all right with that. So it would be nice if it had a little bit better top end power, but I will tell you this, it'll never make, well, I say it'll never make power to rival the 750. It may make the power, but I just don't feel like it's going to have the gear multiplication to be able to hang with the 750 on the big end. Even once it's all done, like with all, soup to nuts, with all the fixings, it's just not going to have it. And I think that the same thing is going to happen with the 600 once we get to that point. But here's the twist. You can only run them for as long as you've got gear to run. And the 600 may start reeling in the R9 only to run out of gear by the time it gets a chance to get around it. That's a win. Even if you're reeling in your opponent, if you run out of gear, you run out of real estate, that's it. So, let's see. Pyro's asking, why'd you go from V-Cycle to Two-Wheel Dyno Works? Um, Part of it was throttle tuning. Um, I there were some off throttle issues that I kind of had. I didn't really want to get into a back and forth with V Cycle. It's really not a criticism on his tuning ability. It was just there were some things about off throttle, partial throttle that I didn't. It just wasn't really working out. The ride mode's a little bit different. I just didn't really feel like there was enough. That like ride mode number 2 was just really neutered from what I could tell. So, um, and there's other reasons too. There's more development with Two Wheel Dyno Works for the bigger cams, which I kind of saw that coming. Once I figured out that Crowler was offering those cams, I knew that Two Wheel was going to get them, and it was going to be kind of a thing. They were already going to be way ahead of that. So V-Cycle wasn't. They are, active participants in that development. And also with the newer style M4, there was already mapping available for that, which does make a difference because the newer exhaust, there is a difference there. So a number of reasons. Nothing is critical of V-Cycle. It's just there was a better path for me to move, and that's what I did. So that's where we're at with this. And moving forward, obviously there's a lot that goes kind of hand in hand with Two Wheel Dyno Works and these bikes as it is. Fire was saying, thanks for the explanation. I'm still waiting on my exhaust, but going to get my ECU flash soon. So trying to get as much info. Of course, absolutely. Yeah, like I say, I didn't have anything against V-Cycle. I just went two wheel because of it's a different level of experience that I need somebody to have with that platform already. I'm already moved way past just a tune and a pipe for that bike, it looks like. Jerry, I got a guy here with a trailer dyno that can hook you up. Dude, I wouldn't let that guy, it's like I told Carl, I wouldn't let that guy tune a wheelbarrow. Forget it. I already gave that guy a shot. That was a terrible idea on my part. And I can't believe that dude hasn't, well, I can because of expense, but I can't believe that guy still hadn't gotten that bike retuned. Pilo's asking, would I flash a bone stock 600? Not a Gixxer 600. No, you don't have to. Listen, here's the beauty. I cannot tell you. Okay, so it's not that you don't have to. You could, but you don't have to flash really any of the older style 600s. They're already really good. The mapping is good. I'll even go so far as to say this: my 600 with just the slip on. You saw me riding that thing, guys. I'm constantly giggling when I'm riding that bike. I loved it with the stock tune and with just a little slip on. However, with that M4 exhaust and with the tune that's on it, it is a little monster. And if you watch me coming into Carousel, that is second gear. That's the top of second gear right before it hits the rev limiter. And the engine braking is perfect, but it will absolutely rip into Carousel. And then engine brake, drop the bike over, looking through the corner, and it's just rolling into the throttle. And by the way, that surface is not good, guys. It's like if you can picture, like if you could picture concrete getting hit by hail rocks, right? That's what it looks like in a way. It's what it feels like going over it. So you'll notice the bike will move around a little bit. That 600, man, even when it was stock, I would come right off of the apex and I'm looking right as I would see that corner open up, just roll into the throttle, and that bike could kind of step out a little. That 600 is awesome. And the only thing that holds it back is the fact that it simply can only rev so high. It's only got so much gearing, but man alive, I can tell you that I have had so much fun with that 600. And the only time you ever really are like, man, I could use a little bit more. And I was out with Jerry. So there were times where I just like I would be hanging that thing at wide open on as I'm going through apexes, and I will enter and exit wide open with that 600. And what's funny is that I'm putting down more power on, like, as I'm coming out of the corner, I'm putting down more power than you might think. The 600, when it's spooled up, it's laying down a lot of RPM. There's a lot of horsepower being used. There's not a lot of torque. And so the bike will just pick a line and it stays there. And this is the weird thing about riding a 600 fast versus a 750. A lot of guys ask, what's the difference between the two? It works out like this. When when you're going fast on a 600 and you drop the bike into, say, a left-hander, and so I'm looking, like, you're my corner exit, I'm looking for my corner exit. When I see everything start to open up and I go wide open, the 600 will stick to its line. Okay, so the 600, even when you're on the side of the tire about like this, you're going through the corner, it'll stick to its line, and that's it. You go straight out the corner, right? So it goes over, straight out the corner. A 750, especially when it's been re-geared, or a leader bike. Leader bikes are really fun when it comes to this. One of the things I miss about having a leader bike is leader bikes on the side of the tire. You're coming through the corner as you're looking. As I see my exit spot open up, I'm rolling into the throttle, and the leader bike will actually shift and start to go wide and then go straight as it's pushing, because you're starting to lift the front of the tire or lift the bike up just a little bit. That's going to cause it to push a little bit more into the throttle. You can adjust that with the rear tire. You can't do that with the 600 normally. And so if you're used to riding a bigger displacement bike and you go to roll into the throttle, it's going to feel like nothing's there. And it's only because there's just not enough torque to push the bike out. And so you might find yourself a little bit tighter, and you'll just make a slight adjustment and then exit the corner. That's one of the only things that I found myself like, if the 600 was only a 750. But you've got to really be trucking for that to really be a thing, honestly. And quite frankly, it makes you a smoother rider. And the 600 is a safer bike to get out there and play with, because you're not burdened with the extra torque, although you do have more maybe usable horsepower when you're on the side of the tire, and especially on fast sweepers, then the 600 will get a little bit, it'll start to move around a little bit. And because you've got so much more RPM and you're utilizing a lot of horsepower, it'll start to feather the tire pretty good. So, DM saying, if any update to the R9, I would like to see Yamaha go back to the 5-valve per cylinder on the triple with a bigger intake cam. What do you think that would do? It would help it. It would help it be a better triple, honestly. The 5-valve thing was pretty good. The only downside to the 5-valve is there was a bit more complexity, and that adds in cost. And that's one of the things, Yamaha was really good about throwing a lot of technology, engine technology, at these bikes, but all of that contributed to a significantly higher cost to manufacture. And there's just nowhere to go. You've got a ceiling that you just can't punch through with the cost, the cost to consumer. So they're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. What they could do with it is slightly larger valve. Slightly larger valves would be great. Slightly different port configuration, just to bump up airflow by maybe, if they could bump airflow up by about 4%, maybe 5%, that would get you about another, call it 5 horsepower, but it would give you breathing room on the top end. And you could do that with stock cams. Um, okay, so but here's the thing. So what you have to understand too is that again, you don't have a big piston in the R9. This is where the R9 is always going to be limited. It's not a bad thing, it's a good thing, but it is what it is. So let me give you an example. The Street Triple 765 has what? It's a 74 millimeter piston. Whatever that is, it's the exact same size piston as in the R9 in the CP3. The CP3 gets its displacement from the stroke. So it's not a bigger bore, even though it is kind of a wide engine, at least wide for its displacement. It gets all of its grunt, not because it's got a bigger piston and you've got more force pushing down on the piston. It's because it's a smaller piston that's getting its twist from the longer stroke. This is nothing new. And matter of fact, this is exactly what they did with the GSXR 750 back in 2006. You got to remember, before that, GSXR 750 had a much larger bore and a shorter stroke. That's where your GSXR 1000 came from. Let's not forget, the more you know. So, but what does that all mean? Well, it means that the only way to get more power out of that bike is either a revised cylinder head that simply allows for better flow given the valve sizes that it has now, which are probably optimized for the piston size, or you got to go with a revised port design, which means like having a set of ported heads from the factory. In other words, just bigger holes for air to go through. And a higher compression ratio. And the easiest thing to change out of all of that, you would think, would be the higher compression ratio. Just put a thinner head gasket or change the piston configuration. Here's the problem with that. So the cylinder head on the CP3, for its displacement, has very high velocity, which means incredibly efficient cylinder filling from, say, I don't know, 5,000 RPM till about 9,000 RPM with the cams that it has now. That's a wide spread, but there is a ton of cylinder fill. If you increase the compression ratio and leave the stock cams in place, what's going to happen is your dynamic compression ratio goes way up, and now you're going to have an engine that could be fuel quality sensitive. See what I mean? So it's not as simple as throw more compression at it and throw more head flow at it, because now you're in a situation where you can't spin the engine any higher because you have piston speed concerns, and you can't put any more pressure on the cylinder because of the cylinder head and cylinder fill is so efficient that you end up with a potential for, on some level, either low speed spark knock, or you've got somewhere in that mix an overly efficient, for lack of a better way of putting it, engine that's going to be octane sensitive. Oh, Squid saying he likes the short stroke over the long stroke. Here's the thing. It works out well in theory, the short stroke with the bigger piston, because you can have bigger valves, right? Bigger valves, more airflow, more bang, more pressure on the top of the piston. And so you end up making more torque with a shorter stroke in that configuration. But here's the problem. Bigger bore means wider engine, right? Wider engine means bigger thing. Bigger thing means more weight. More weight and bigger thing means more surface area to get air around. This was a big issue with aircraft engines back in the day. It's like, okay, what do? Do we make longer stroke engines and force feed them with low compression, or do we use the big bore and use the shorter stroke? And so how did that work out? Radial engines that were air cooled tried to get the biggest piston they could with the shortest stroke that they could because they wanted their frontal area to be small. Conversely, water cooled V configuration engines wanted a smaller piston with the longest stroke because they're force feeding this thing and they want to have the most grunt and the most torque while utilizing properly a compressor to make up for the lack of airflow. So all kinds of stuff go into engine development. Fun stuff. Pilo's asking, why don't we put 91? No, don't we all put 91 plus anyways? I'm not sure if R9 requires high octane. It does. It requires 90 plus. The other thing is this, though. You have to remember that even though we may all put in 91, what comes out of the pump isn't always 91. So let me give you an example. You go to your gas pump and you roll up and you're on your motorcycle and you're topping off your tank. You're going from here to there. You've got maybe half a tank or whatever, and you're going to put the gas in your tank. Or you're putting gas in a tank of a bike that only has like a 3.7 gallon gas tank like the R9. So what happens? You take the pump out of the thing, you stick it in your tank, you press premium gas, and you start to squeeze. Now, the person that used that pump before you, because presumably it's a single hose pump, you don't have a hose per octane. If you did, you'd be in really good shape, but most people don't have that. Not outside of ethanol-free options. So that the residual fuel that's in the system has to be purged. And where does it get purged? It gets purged into your gas tank. So if the person that used the gas tank before you put in 87, then you've got, say, half a gallon worth of gas that's going into your tank that's 87 octane before the 91 plus octane gets into your tank. So you got to remember that what you're putting into the gas tank may be 91 or 93 on the pump, but in practice, because of how much limitations you've got with a gas tank, you might be pressing 91 and you're getting 90 and a half, right? Or you're getting 90 if you're just topping off your tank, or you're getting less than that. So manufacturers have to take fuel quality into account when they're putting the tunes together for these bikes. And you got to remember that you're not running on spec fuel. So there's always going to be variations from one gas station to the next to the next. So it's just something that you have to, it's something that you have to consider, basically. Mickey's saying, what's up, everyone? Mickey's saying, oh, 91, 93 has more detergent in it. Kind of. Here's the other thing. It also has a better base fuel. So one thing to remember is that premium, whenever you have, say, for example, 87 octane, you have to remember that all the fuel now is E10. And so if all the fuel now is E10 and you have 87 octane, what's the base gasoline rated at? It's really more like 83 octane, right? So this is where things get interesting. The base fuel for, say, 93 octane E10 is actually 90 octane. So it's not just the add pack, because that is the big difference from fuel pump to fuel pump, from distributor to distributor. It's the add packages, which is a combination of detergents, there's lubricity additives, friction modifiers that are part of the lubricity package. I'm trying to think of these things off the top of my head. There's a lot of stuff. And of course, octane improvers that are also part of all of that. So it's not just the one thing. There's a lot of stuff that goes into the different grades of fuel. Oh, Pilot's saying, I put 93, so I estimate 92 unless I get 94 from Sunoco. I wish we had 94 from Sunoco down here. Saying only rocket fuel for my scooter. I like it. You know, it reminds me, back in the day, guys go, oh, it's avgas. It's like, don't run avgas in a car. It has a very low specific gravity. And no, just don't ever run avgas. Paul is saying, I thought detergents were almost the same. That difference is more about which gas station I go to for better quality and additives. No. The detergents are different. Now there are government minimums that you have to qualify as a motor vehicle fuel, as far as what those detergents are that are in the fuel, but they're not very thorough, right? It's not like it's the best ad pack that money can buy to meet the government minimum standards. So that's where tier 1 comes into play. And if you're buying tier 1 fuel, then that is a separate, independently vetted ad pack, that when you employ that ad pack, you're having better detergents, better overall performance, more consistent octane, all of that. So your Shell, your Exxon, those are the two big ones, right? And you may have some, better local players. Sunoco, I think, falls into that. So there's a lot that goes into it. Miki saying, I have 26,000 on a 750. Should I do anything with the fuel filter? No, not really. What year is your 750? Those fuel filters are, they're kind of filter for life type things. They're gigantic units in those things. It's kind of like with cars. They've got fuel filters, but the reality is that you don't ever have to swap them out. Oh, Miki's saying, it's a GSXR 2005. Oh, yeah, probably not. If the bike's running good, don't sweat it. Oh, it's an 11 750? No, I wouldn't worry about it. If you start feeling the bike really laying over on the big end, it could have, at some point, it could need a fuel filter, but mine's a 13 and it doesn't have any issues. But again, stick with the good fuel. That's going to help you out tremendously. But that's, again, when you get into the fuel part of it too, it kind of makes you wonder. You go, okay, well, if all of that's true, then why can you run, 13 to 1, talking about compression ratio, 13.8, like on the new Gixxer 1000. And you can't run those compression ratios on like something like an R9, the bigger piston bikes. A lot of times, there's a couple of reasons. One is port velocity typically is high. The bigger the piston, normally you've got a lot of port velocity and there's a lot of cylinder fill, so you just can't get away with the higher compression. But another thing is just how the tune is, what the design of the combustion chamber is, and the fact that a smaller combustion chamber is going to have real quick flame front propagation. So you're not going to be running very much timing. In fact, you run low. The lower the timing, the better. Timing, a lot of people equate timing with power. It's not. It's just like tuning a guitar string. You turn it too much and it's not the right sound you're looking for. Not enough, it's not the right sound you're looking for. It's striking the chord that is what you're looking for. And it's funny because I'm just like you guys. I was recently with the Bonneville. I was redoing the tune and I tried to cheat a little bit of timing into the bike and it hated it. And matter of fact, it ran like ass. I tried cheating it up 1.5. It was 1.5 degrees through kind of a narrow band where I was just trying to interpolate everything and make it even. And the bike hated it. I put everything back where I had it before, and it was a real happy Bonneville. So, by the way, I did try to race a Ducati Super Sport with the Bonneville. That's because I have to do things like that. Older Super Sport, air-cooled bike. We had a chance to play around, but we were kind of being monitored a little bit, so we couldn't get too froggy. But shout out to my homeboy with the 900 SS. But no. Getting back to it, the reason why you can run that is because for MBT, maximum brake torque, which is what you're tuning for. This is some nerd stuff here, so strap in, boys. But whenever you're tuning for MBT, you don't have to worry about timing with a small combustion chamber that flame front just bang goes really quick. You don't need the extra timing. Whereas with a larger piston, you're going to need more timing just to make the flame front propagate to where you've got peak cylinder pressure at like 10 degrees after top dead center, or 10 degrees of crankshaft rotation, I should say, after top dead center. God, we drug off into some tuning nerd stuff there for you. Oh, Miki, 2005 600 and 2011 750. No, it's all built into the fuel pump assembly on those bikes. It's not like my Daytona where it has a fuel pump and then there's this internal tank thing that goes to a filter that then go. It's a convoluted mess in that bike. Don't listen. Vintage bike for what we're talking about is 2005 and newer, up to like 2013. I implore you to never mess with bikes that are older than that because it's nothing but transitional technology. If you want a vintage bike, find something that has carburetors, because messing with like Gen 1, like phase 1 fuel injected stuff is a flipping nightmare to deal with. It's the one thing about my dad's bike that it's one of the reasons why I don't ride it as often as I would like, is that I cringe if I think something's going to go wrong with that bike. I just don't want to have to work on it. It's a mess. Mickey, and in 2015 Grom. I need to get a Grom just to have over here. I was saying nice. Oh, Jeff's checking in. Time got away, just got here. Welcome in, my friend. Talking R9 stuff, went off on some tuning things, went through some engine dynamics things, all kinds of fun stuff on the show tonight. And it is fun. I enjoy that kind of stuff. I really do. And let me see if I can show you guys kind of some of the nerd crap. So I get so deep in the weeds with this. My background always been in and around something to do with tuning. I'm surprised I don't have a motorcycle dyno right on the other side of this wall. Probably because I would obsess over it. Like I really would. I would get like nutty about that. But this isn't even a good one. Oh, Jerry, your bike's in here, by the way. I was even doing some math on your bike. But this is some of the stuff. I don't know if that's going to show up. These are some of the things that I'll make when I'm bored on a rainy day. And what I'm doing is I'm literally just going in and doing a comparative, gearing, what is, you want to talk about. Okay, here you go. Here's another one for you. Or it's the same one, just scroll down a little bit. So you can see gear ratios, delta gearing from one to the next, conversion factors for actual twist at the rear tire, gearing one bike versus the other and how that translates into, it just keeps going on and on. I mean, when you talk about nerding out, I mean, guys, I can, and then here's another one. I'll even do, okay, check this out. On the, the right-hand side? That's, okay, what does that equate to for a 4,000-pound car? How much horsepower would you have to the same power-to-weight ratio as the motorcycle does? So in this case, it's kind of hard to read, but a 4,000-pound car would have to have 783 horsepower to be able to accelerate the way that that a 1,000 cc? I forget how that one was because I ended up Let's see, P14 versus M4. Hang on. What was M4? What was that calculation? M14. Ah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's a 1000 cc bike. So to accelerate pounds per horsepower, yeah, you'd have to have basically 800 horsepower, which makes sense. And that's based on 4,000 pounds versus a 450 pound motorcycle, I believe. And that's with a 200-pound rider. So there's all kinds of like nerd stuff that I'll put together in here, and I'll end up forgetting that I'll have done these too. So fun stuff. But that's the kind of dorkage you only find here at Cyclemoto. Oh, Mickey's saying, thanks for the advice, Mason. The dealer pretty much said the same thing and also said, don't catch your bike on fire playing with it. True that. Jeff's loving his R9. I'll tell you what, man, I'm loving mine too. I'd like to get it put back together here pretty soon. And I'm waiting to see how the new Crowler cams work. The latest variant of that. That's what's next on the list at some point sooner or later, it looks like, for the R9. Oh, Pilot's saying 600 horsepower, 600 cc bike in my book. It's about right. Look, you can basically say, look, 750 cc's, 750 horse bike, or 700 horse car, 1,000 cc's, minimum 1,000 horsepower car. So it's always kind of been like that. But I'll literally break it down like into its core components with that. And that's for sport bikes, Bruce is saying, I find that running top tier fuel with consistency, same brand, same fuel, filling up at the same quarter tank, not letting the fuel run down to the bottom of the tank. That's a very good idea. I even get it from the same pump, typically at the gas station. And it works out great. Always go the same Exxon, same pump. Talking about being a creature of habit. But those are the updates, guys. And when the weather clears up and whenever the parts start showing up, I'm really looking forward to getting the R9 back out, running that thing. And we're going to start the head-to-heads here as soon as we possibly can. But one of the things that I'm looking forward to the most is getting the impressions of the R9 with the 190/55 rear tire. That is the thing that I'm looking forward to, believe it or not, more than like the DNA thing or the switch tuners, whatever. I'm not worried about that so much. It's just, how does that bike drop into corners now that I've got a little bit more weight over the nose and a little bit rounder profile on that tire? It's going to help that bike so much. One of the things about the R9 that I find is it's just, I'm constantly running wide with that thing, and I've got a lot more lean angle. And I don't know if I showed you, I think I did show you guys this. It's just how much of the tire that I'm using. So this is the stock tire, the S22 off of the R9. And I mean, I'm using a ton of this tire. Let's see. Right here, I think it actually says S22. I mean, the S22, yeah, it's actually worn off. If you can barely see what's left of it right there. See, you can barely see the ghost of where it said S22 on the side of the tire. That R9, the thing is, the R9 will gnarl up a set of tires. It's got so much torque on corner exits, just like having a leader bike, except I've got all the rider aids off. And so I'm getting, quite a bit of movement and tire spin. There you go. You can really see a little bit better now. Light sitting a little bit better. You can see the shadow coming back over there. The R9 will light the tire up on corner exit. You guys have heard me do that too. There was one video that I did where I'm coming back into the marina where you do the right hander coming in, you do the left hander, and I'm just roll into the throttle nice and hard, and you hear the bike, it starts picking up. He goes, yeah, yeah, and you really see the tack flash over when it starts to light the tire up. I mean, it's got a lot of grunt, guys. Let's see. Oh, Indy's saying, just joining the chat. So, random topic. If you're ever interested in writing and reviewing my Street Triple, let me know. Um, Possibly, I'm actually, I've ridden the Street Triple and I like it. The thing about the Street Triple, and this is, and I appreciate that, by the way. The thing about the Street Triple is it's got to be tuned. Any of the Euro 5 bikes, in the States, the Euro 5 bikes are frustrating because they get so neutered on the far right-hand side of the tack. But that bike with a tune and exhaust is really good. Jeff's asking, did you get your ECU back? It is leaving today. Actually, I'll get it back hopefully, well, this week. But the thing is I've got to check and see where my where the stage 2 is, that DNA stage 2. So that might end up going into next week. But again, it's going to be all rainy and funky this week anyway. So Matt's saying Saphira is going to be about the baddest R9 on the streets. I tell you what, it's going to be good. It's going to be real good. Oh, Indy's saying Two-Wheel Dynoworks tune. That's the best way to go for those bikes. So yeah, I can promise you that is an awesome bike. I rode a stock RS model, and I really liked it. I nearly bought it. And you know what's funny is that I nearly bought that bike with the then Moto 2 serial number 518 sitting right next to it. And now that the RX is out, there have been moments where I've thought about picking one of those bikes up. The only thing is that I just really want a Daytona. I want them to make that bike into the Daytona that it should always have been. It's such a good bike. And of course, the 675 that it's based on, same chassis, same swing arm, same almost everything, is still to this day one of the best motorcycles you could ever throw a leg over. I mean, up in the mountains, I'm not kidding. I mean, 675 was weapon of choice. My 750, believe it or not, it was not the superior bike up in the mountains. On track, I was faster, but up in the mountains, 675 is a really good bike. And it remains to be to this day. It's just an awesome machine. Zombie's asking, what's your thoughts about listening to music in a full face helmet? I used to a lot. In fact, I used to have, back in the iPod days, hang on. It's not hanging up there. Well, it is. The white jacket, I used to have my iPod in there was a pocket in the jacket, and I used to have my ears in all the time. And I was always wearing that helmet right there. Rock out. I like I said, I used to listen to music. I don't listen to music now, but I'm not listening to music because I'm filming. And that's the other thing. A lot of guys say, hey, let's go ride. And I'm like, dude, if I had the time, I would love to. But anymore, the only time that I'm riding is if I'm filming. And if I'm not filming, I'm trying to figure something out with the bike, or I'm at practice time or something like that. And that's really not a good time. Those practice sessions, I don't film. I play when I'm filming. I've got to blur everything out, do as I say, not as I do type thing. And that's not because I think I'm doing something bad. It's just, just being safe. But there's certain things that do not need to make it for public consumption. And he's saying that's fair. Yeah, it's a great bike. Love those bikes. Let's see. Leon saying, I have an 84 Kawasaki GPZ 1100. Awesome bike. In pristine condition. Runs great. Needs fork seals. Firecracker red. Love it. How much do you think it's worth? Right now? Shit. I'll tell you this. I don't know what it's worth. Okay. Because different buyers will want that bike for different reasons. But if it's in pristine condition, in rideable condition, even if it needs a set of fork seals, it's probably easily going to fetch $6,000. And it could be higher to a different buyer, but it's the right color. I can tell you that. Mickey saying, Zombie, it's addicting. Indeed it is. Bruce is saying, I don't have an R9. Do you experience head shake under acceleration with the R9? Well, if a little bit. So if you watch the only time I've ever had that bike act a little silly, act a little bit leader bike-ish, is going into carousel. And the reason for that is I'm under very hard acceleration for 3 full gears going into carousel. And it's just skittering the front tire. In some cases, that front tire is not touching the ground. When I roll into first, I'll roll into first, grab second. And when I grab second, then it's pinned. I'll roll the thing back. That tire is not touching again until I shift into third, and it'll just barely come back down, and you'll get a little bit of a head shake as it casters its way into correction. But I have not experienced that. So here's the scary part about a bike is if you get an expansion joint head shake. And the R9 under acceleration is light-headed, but it's nothing like what the R model Gixxer 1000 was. But I had that bike when I had it set up for the street. That is a terrible suspension setup. I ended up going back and tightening everything back up, and it helped that bike out a lot. It didn't head shake anymore. At least I couldn't force it to do it like I could before. I could actually get the R model to head shake just by whipping the throttle, sitting upright and just whip the throttle, and it would come up and shake. I was like, come on, dude. So I would do one-handed power wheelies with it. In fact, I did it once. I rolled into the throttle. It got light, and because I was not perfectly straight with my hand on the bar, it started getting to a head shake. I rolled off of it, and it usually a quick roll off or a quick whack of the throttle will straighten it out. It didn't, and so it was in third gear, and I just fanned the thing back and sat back and just power wheelied it up and sat it back down. Head shake gone away. But that bike was bad about that. And a lot of that had to do more with the shock setting than anything else. And I had cranked compression all the way down on that bike to get it to act right. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. Okay, so the R9, it is getting a steering dampener, by the way. And I'm getting it a steering dampener just for principle's sake. And it needs it-ish. It's going to need it less with the taller rear tire because it's going to be sitting up a little bit more in the back. A little bit more weight over the front. It's going to be fine. But the 600 has one. The 750's got one. The 1000s have them. There's no reason for the bike not to have them. If nothing else, just to kind of tighten up the steering feel of the bike. Just by a little bit. Let's see. Mickey's saying, I like the head shake. It doesn't bother me. That's and you'll see me go, little head shake, and all that tells me is that I'm having fun. And that's just the bike communicating. The only time, I'll put it to you like this, I have had, this is when R9s, forget that they're R9s. They think they're leader bikes. Had the bike on a left-hander. A left-hander? Left-hander or right-hander? No, it was a right-hander. Had the bike on a right-hander and was rolling. No, yeah, it was on a right-hander. So it's on a righty though that you guys typically don't see. and I came into it kind of hot in third gear. I was on the side of the tire, pretty far on the side of the tire. You see what I'm dealing with over here. Um, and I whacked the throttle at apex, right? And it was kind of a cool day. Fucking R9, dude. This is why I love the R9, because it does certain things that I just find adorable with a motorcycle. I'm looking through the corner, and I again see my exit. I'm just rolling to the throttle nice and hard, and it on the side of the tire, the bike comes up, does a little side of the tire wheelie, and as it comes up, I'm just adjust weight over, and I'm rolling back into the throttle. And when I was rolling back into the throttle, it landed, and I got it on the side of the tire. It goes da 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 like that. And I'm just going, yeah, pinned it at that point. It's like, let's go. And so this bike's just, the ass of the bike's going here like this. The bike's just totally tripped out. Part of that, okay, so rewind here, because I don't want you to think that the bike's unruly. It's not. Where I was doing that, okay, when we come into our favorite little stop signs, right after that is the exact opposite of what you just saw. It's a right-hander or a left-hander that goes into a right-hander. And the right-hander, you're accelerating hard out of, just like I was on the turn before, except it's a little bit dusty on that side because there's a lot of trucks that come through right there on my right-hand side when you're looking at it. And so it like got traction, lost traction, everything was happening. It was a lot of fun. And I remember telling Orange Crush about it, like, dude, this thing is a freaking riot to ride. So it does certain things that are a lot of fun, and that's stuff that even a leader bike wouldn't have done at that point, because at that RPM, the leader bike would not have had the torque production that the R9 does. So that's why it's so important that you understand that as much as I hated the R9, and as much as I was just, little miss bitch face about the R9 coming into this, that's how much I like the bike now. So there's some shit that you guys don't see me do. And I kind of like, and sometimes I'm just not wearing the camera helmet. I'm wearing like, my normal showy that I'll be out there wearing. And there's just certain things you like, dude. Anyway, R9 does a lot of fun things. So does little sister, the 600. I have to be mindful and aware of where I am when I'm riding that 600, because I have a funny habit of getting really aggressive with the 600, more so than I do with the 750. You know what's funny about the 750 is that I am almost more chill with the 750 than I am with the R9 or with the 600. Also, listen to the R9 on the side of the tire on a couple of the earlier videos. Listen to it spinning the tire on corner exit. You watch the tack, it'll go as I'm exiting corners, and it's just the bike. It's coming through the. Sorry, the bike is a riot to ride because it does things that it's kind of not supposed to do. Oh, and that's the other thing I want to share with you guys. So notice again, I'm showing you how much of this tire. Again, I've got to get the light just right so it picks up the shadow of the S22 right here. I'm using all of this tire, and this is an issue that R9 owners will start to face once they start pushing the pace a little bit, is that you'll start using every ounce of this tire to the point where you actually need a little bit wider tire. So if you ever look at the 750, it's got a chicken strip about as wide as my index finger all the way around the rim of that tire. So it's the exact same width as the chicken strip that's on the front tire, which means that I'm using the same amount of tire on the front of the bike as I am on the rear of the bike. Whereas this thing, and I don't even know why there's really not. It's just like a shiny spot, because that's all eaten up right here. So that's literally just the ledge of the tire right here. The difference is with this tire, I'm using up all of the tire, and I'm trying to ask just this portion of the tire to manage what is in essence like 70 or 72 foot-pounds of torque on corner exit. So, in fact, you can, I mean, it's kind of hard to see the lighting, but I mean, it's feathered up pretty good all the way across here. Little marbling and all that. So, the bike's just making a ton of power, and God, it's really, you can really notice it here, like right in this area of the tire. I mean, it's just getting chewed up. So it definitely needs more tire. So anyway, that's one of the things, like, chicken strips. No, I want them because I'm using so much of the stock tire that it's, I don't have the contact patch that a bike with 70 odd pound-feet of torque needs to the rear tire, by the way. And here's the other thing. It is able to deploy all of that torque at low RPM. So that's another reason why, I was like, damn, I don't understand. Why does this bike not have a better tire? And you go, well, it's only making 120 horsepower to the rear tire. It's like, yeah, but it's putting all of the torque down like all of the time. And in some of the lower speed corners, you get a handful of throttle. And again, you'll just watch the tach and listen to what's going on with the bike, and you'll hear it. Because at first I thought it was clutch. I was like, I know that ain't the clutch. I went back and, just hammered the piss out of the bike going, okay, is everybody cool? And then went back and hit the corners, and it was for sure, you can feel the bike. The R9s are incredibly stable on the side of the tire, so you don't really feel it as much. You'll feel it maybe barely step out, but it's definitely doing it. But just watch the tach and you'll see where I'm going from with that. Let's see. Oh, let me catch up with you guys. Oh, Pilot's rocking the Cardo. Nice. Zombie's asking, do I have any experience with no-cut frame sliders? I heard they weren't as strong, but I don't want to cut my plastics. They're not going to be as strong. They're going to have a little cutout thing. Look, frame sliders are good for like parking lot whoopsies, but I don't necessarily like them on track, right? Because now you got something that can just dig into something. For a street bike, though, I'm okay with no cuts because you're not asking them to do anything other than to just kind of catch the bike. My Daytona has no cuts on it, by the way, and it's fine. Although I did have, dude, I had one of the freaking pucks fall off of it when I first put the whole bike back together. So don't forget your Loctite. Oh, Mickey's saying if I start my ride without music, it's fine. But if I'm listening to music, then stop. It sucks. And I get that. I would have the iPod croak on me back in the day. And Pilot's saying, I sing with no music. I do the exact same. I'll make up songs. You'll know that you guys I haven't videoed when I'm out and about, like, in other areas, but I will unconsciously start coming up with music and songs and things like that because ADHD works for me. Pilot saying from hating on R9 to loving R9 is only one step, exhaust and tune. Basically, that's about right. Bruce is asking question, how is the throttle play or lag with the R9? I use G2 cams on my bike. The thing is, I do too. The 750s have, or the 750, well, they did. The 750 and the 600 both have G2. I probably should have gone R6 throttle tubes and just cut the housing, but that would have required a lot more work than I was willing to put into those bikes, and they're great with the G2, so thumbs up on that. Now, the throttle play on the R9, now remember, it does not have a, by the way, if you can't hear it, it is coming down like cats and dogs and whatever outside. But if you, where was I saying? Oh, it doesn't use a different throttle style like that. It is all the assembly for the ride-by-wire is all in the grip, so to speak. It's all in the electronics on the handlebar. It's not like the Suzukis that go to have cable actuated what is in essence speed controllers or rheostat that they use, which arguably is a better system for a lot of folks because you can adjust the throttle play. On the R9, it's actually very similar to a properly set up a throttle. It's got a little bit of wiggle in there, but just enough wiggle to allow, a free movement. It's not really bad. Thunder and lightning, very, very frightening me. So it's not bad. I wouldn't mind if I could tighten that up a little bit, it'd be cool, but it really doesn't affect me too much. You immediately adjust out of it once you start riding the bike. The only time you don't is if there's a laggy throttle, there's something going on in the throttle tune that is adding to like a bit of an off, like an initial tip in, stumble, which is usually, that's usually fueling. That's typically going to be a lean tip in issue. So as long as that's in control, then you're going to be in good shape. Frenchie's checking in. Hey, Faisano saying, after purchasing the R9, how much did you actually spend overall, including taxes, fees, and extras? Was the final number around 17,000? Well, let's see. I got the bike for 11,900, no freight, no prep. And from that, tax would have been about $600. So call it 12,500, and then make it 13,500 with the exhaust, 14 with the tune, and then the gadgets and gizmos. Yeah, call it 14,500, and then the tires. So total about $15,000. So not quite nowhere near 17. That's why for me, putting cams in the bike ain't gonna be that bad of an idea. Zombie saying, when I let off the throttle on my 750, it decelerates quickly. Is that something I can adjust with the cable, or will getting the ECU flashed fix that? Getting the ECU flashed may fix that. Let the tuner know that you don't want as much engine braking. Two Wheel Dyno Works is really good on the 750 with their engine braking not being very aggressive. It's a kind of a bit more of a track oriented engine braking than it is a street oriented. A lot of street guys like heavy engine braking. Track guys, if you're on a long track, you don't want a lot of real heavy engine braking. Oh, Bruce saying, nice, did not know that about the R9 throttle. Yeah. The Bonneville is the same way. The Bonneville does not have a cable actuated speed controller. Again, it's all handled right there in the electronics. The throttle tube is mounted to your throttle controller. It's literally sitting right there in plain sight. Or I should say hiding in plain sight, as it were. And here's the interesting thing when it comes to, okay, so Gixxer 750, Gixxer 600 is still electronic throttle. It just has one throttle that's actuated by the human, and that's you, and one throttle that's actuated by the computer. The Gixxer 1000 is all electronic throttle, but it's still a cable actuated speed controller. And interestingly enough, the dual throttle body is also shared by the 636, widely considered to be inferior to a true single ride-by-wire type throttle. But weirdly enough, that dual throttle, the dual throttle body, it does something with air mixture and how it creates turbulence to where it's smoother on transition. Paul is saying, I thought ECU tunes usually get rid of engine braking in general. No. You need engine braking. You're thinking of deceleration fuel cutoff, which is that snappy, like, type throttle thing. No. it eliminates DFCO, which is deceleration fuel cutoff. But no, engine braking, you definitely still have to have it. And that's something you can adjust it. Believe it or not, you can, I got two different adjustments on the R9. I can have aggressive engine braking, or I can have less aggressive engine braking. And that's just a thumb, like a couple of buttons away, and I can adjust that. A lot of more modern motorcycles that have ride by wire have adjustable engine braking for that. Me saying at lower speed, zombie, yes, but at 150 off throttle, if you get knocked down to 130 quick, yeah, it just the way that the engine braking protocol works is different for every manufacturer. Paul is saying that just might be air drag. Yeah, a lot of that is wind resistance when you're hauling ass. But again, it's the amount of how shut the butterflies are when you drop that throttle to zero. So yeah, and at higher speeds, obviously you're going to have more actual wind resistance. And let's not forget too, and one thing before, and I'm not trying to build in any excuses for the R9 versus the 600 or the 750, but 600 in this case. Keep in mind the R9 has aero, which is wind resistance, and it's got a big ass fairing, which is awesome when you're riding the bike, but it's not awesome when you're trying to, punch through the air at higher speeds. So there's a lot that the R9 has going for it, guys. And again, I didn't like the bike. I wasn't even comfortable sitting on the bike before, but here's the weird thing. You want to know what was the strangest thing about the R9 for me? It wasn't that it was the throttle mapping, because I already knew it was going to be kind of junk anyway, but I rode the V-Cycle Nut tuned XSR 900, and that bike was really good. It won, Sport Naked of the Year. But it wasn't any of that. It wasn't the technology, which I was worried about that. But as it turns out, the technology on the R9 is extremely not intrusive. In fact, the R9 is better than the R1 that I rode in terms of how the actual rider aids are deployed and how they work with the power output of the R9, which is a lot gruntier at lower RPM because of engine design, right? It's a lot less intrusive, or at least it's much less noticeable, I should say. But then again, the R1's a lot more powerful bike, so you're going to maybe notice it more, but it's way better than the CBR 1000, and it's on point with, or on par, I should say, which is on point with the GSXR 1000 that I had. So it's really good in that respect. And that was one of the things after I was riding it. But you know what the weird thing about the R9? The R9, when I sat on it, was incredibly uncomfortable when I sat on the one that I was finally able to get a leg over at the dealership. But when I sat on my bike, bam, instantly just everything fit. Everything was right, perfect where it needed to be. And I was like, what the frick just happened? Because when I first, this is what happened. Okay, so since it's a rainy evening, this is kind of what happened. The bike that I bought, I think, was the same bike that got sold when I went to go look at an R9 and literally throw a leg over it for the first time ever. I think that was the bike that got sold right before the day before I got to the dealership. And then they didn't get another bike for forever. It's just that my bike came back real early. My bike was only out of the dealership for like a month and a half, maybe even 2 months at the most. She only had like 300 miles on it. So what was weird is when I sat on the R9 at the dealership, though, the bike felt like this massive thing. It just, for whatever reason, my internal wiring was having a real hard time homing in on that particular bike. But I get to Wild West, walk up to it. They had it sitting right outside and it was pointed towards the building. So all I saw was the ass end of my bike. And I walk up to it, laughed at the color because the last color I wanted was blue. And now I can't imagine my R9 being any other color but blue. So I'm like, oh my God, the thing looks purple. And I throw a leg over it, sit on it, and I mean instantly everything fell into place. I mean the bars, it felt tiny to me. And I went, oh shit, it's coming home with me. And that's exactly how it worked out. So as weird as it may sound, when I say I started off life not liking the R9, it wasn't just because, oh, I don't like the pay, it doesn't look good on a spec sheet. No, I was even hating on it even harder after I sat on the thing. So it was just kind of funny the way it all worked out. That's another reason why I look at that bike and I'm like, man, I don't really mind spending the money on it, because this might be a bike that sticks around for a while, and it could end up being a bike, especially with the camshafts, that, I mean, you never know which bike it could kick out of bed. So we'll see how everything works out. Let's see. Oh, Bruce asking, have you keep the stock sprockets front and rear or played with the gearing? No, I haven't, and I'll tell you why. So at first that was on the table. Matter of fact, I had ordered a 42 tooth rear sprocket for that bike, but because that sprocket wasn't going to come in until like June, um, I started doing the math on the bike. And as it turns out, with the 190/55 rear tire and the extra RPM that I'll have to play with, I am just covering some numbers that I need to cover with the bike in terms of mile an hour and stuff like that. Okay. But here's the crazy thing. In gears 1 through 4, the R9 is geared identical to a GSX-R 1000. In 5th and 6th, it's got a lot longer legs than a leader bike does. And it has to have those longer legs so that you can utilize the torque and only revs so high, right? I'm still losing about 30% of revs even to a leader bike with this thing. But here's the twist. If I made the bike a little bit less aggressive for the mid-range gears, which is how it would affect basically 2, 3, and 4, it would kind of dog 5 and 6. And I need 5th. I need 5th to be strong. Ooh, scary. So anyway, that's the reason why I didn't ended up going with the gear swap. I looked at it and I thought, man, I could go with a bigger front sprocket and extend the first 4 gears a little bit, but it's going to end up making 5th and 6th a little bit too doggy. Plus, the bike is great going down the highway. You park that thing at 90 miles an hour indicated. It's great. It loves life. So I just didn't want to ruin that part of the bike either. Miki's saying, Miki's asking Pilo about the 520. Miki's asking top speed of the R9. It should, with a pipe and tune, not have any problem covering 160. And that is kind of a key number. As long as the bike in 6th gear will cover 160 and in 5th gear can cover 150, like a legit verified 150, you'll be in good shape. And it's not because you need the top speed. That top speed is an indicator of how hard the bike is working, cruising along at 75 miles an hour going down the highway. What you don't want is to be going 75 miles an hour down the highway and you're basically spinning the engine at like 75% of its RPM max capacity, if you will. In much the same way, or half capacity is another good way to look at it. That 10 miles an hour makes a big difference. It is just like somebody turned off a freaking shower head. It was pouring down rain like crazy and then it just stopped. Anyway, that was weird. But that's kind of where you want it to be. Like the 636 was bad about this, where at 75 miles an hour, you're turning 7,500 RPM. And the bike stock would lay over at 13,500 RPM, which meant it meant that bike was kind of buzzy going down the highway. And the extra grunt that you would feel in sixth gear was just the fact that the bike was spinning its ass off. It's like my Gixxer in fourth gear, right? My 600 in fourth gear. So really, when you're looking at top speed, yes, 160 is very doable for the R9 with a pipe and tune. Without a pipe and tune, it's a little bit RPM limited to about 146, 147, somewhere right in that range. Pilot is saying my 520 is doing okay. Going to do a 45 tooth rear change with the new tire. First, I have to stop procrastinate. Yeah. Pilot saying I basically did a stock gearing 520 conversion a few months ago. Hey, what did you torque your? I gotta ask, what did you torque your rear sprocket to? Did you see what the torque spec was for the rear sprocket in the in the shop manual? I'm just curious what if you torqued it down at all, if you even noticed what that number was. Because I would just say that's a big old number. But yeah, no, that's the funny thing about the R9 again is the more time I spend with it, the more time I want to spend with it. And for me, I don't know that there's a bigger compliment that I can give a bike. I'm finding myself old man infatuated with that thing. In that I do see a lot of the value that before I would have completely dismissed as frivolous, or I would have dismissed it as inappropriate for the class. Again, the size of the bike, the power output, how it lays down power, the gadgets and gizmos, all of that kind of stuff. Like when I say gadgets and gizmos, I mean the connectivity. I mean, the different themes, which are, pretty cool. I really like it. I would have dismissed a lot of that, called it totally useless, not appropriate for the class, gimmicky, whatever you want to say, right? But the more time I'm spending with it, the more value that I see in some of those things. Not necessarily in the themes, although I do bounce around from like the round tack, and then I'll go back over to theme 2, which is like the ghost, and I'll go down to like theme 3. So anyway, or theme 4 rather. So I'm always bouncing around with that stuff. But it's just kind of funny. I dive into these things with one mindset, and then I'm completely like, what's funny is that when I do ride reviews, I never have it's rare for me to have a preconceived notion. I'm just getting on a bike, like, wee, motorcycle. I'm having fun, right? I was just hating on the R9. Like, this thing's gonna be a piece of shit, slow ass Yamaha heap of shit. I'm gonna freaking hate this bike and end up loving it. So who knew? Pilot's saying can't remember, something like 35-ish. You've got an R9, right? I am talking about an R9. Anyway, the R9 for the rear sprocket. Hold on. Do I still have it? I think I threw it away. I wasn't going to do it. I downloaded the shop manual for the R9. Is it? If I still had it, it'd be sitting right over here. Anyway, I downloaded the manual for the R9, and it had the rear sprocket torque at 72 pound-feet of torque, 100 Newton meters. And I'm looking at that going, dude, that is a 10 millimeter stud. That thing won't hold 72. If you try to put 72 on that thing, it is going to explode. So anyway, yeah, the walking around numbers between 35 and 50. That's like the max you'll ever see for a 10 millimeter stud. And I was going, Jesus, dude. And there was a lot of guys, I went online, and there was a lot of guys complaining that there's a lot, like more than a few questionable typos. And that was one of the biggest. And everybody's going, fuck that. Do it to like 35. You know, a lot of guys were saying 35. Some of the guys were saying 50. A lot of guys were going torque wrench. I'm never even using torque wrench on those things. So it's like 72, like, not on that. Not on that at all. Bruce is checking out for cookies and milk. I like it. Cheers, brother. Have a good evening. Oh, Pilo's saying you got the Gixxer. So yeah, it is 45 for the rear sprockets on that. I couldn't remember which bike you had. Yeah, and it is 45 straight up for all the Gixxers, no matter what. Yeah, that's rear axle torque. And so, man, I don't have it. I tossed it. So I didn't even want to look at it anymore. I was like, get the fuck out of here. That's not even right. But yeah, it's not only wrong, but it's way wrong. So, but yeah, all Gixxers are 45, no matter what bike it is. It just does not matter. Just torque them to 45 and you are set. But with that, guys, man, we have creeped into another 2-hour show. This has been fun. I always like, I'm having fun because, we get into a 2-hour show and it's like, man, it doesn't even feel like it. So back in the day, if you're new to the channel, when I did Mopar chat, it was almost always a 2-hour chat. And I did that one. Actually, I started off, I was doing 3-hour shows. Those are really old. But yeah, brought it down to the 1 hours. And every once in a while, we'll creep up into a 2-hour show like this. That's when it's fun. But yeah, if you guys are active in the comments, that makes it go really well. So I do appreciate you guys a lot for that. But in saying that, I got to get out of here. Listen, I want to thank each and every one of y'all for hanging out with me. Would not do this without you. If you've stumbled across the show and you're still awake, thanks for stopping by. Do this twice a week, typically on Tuesdays and Saturdays around 9 o'clock Central Standard Time. And with that, I'll give you guys some updates as soon as I start getting more parts for the R9. As soon as it stops being, the flood that we're getting right now, we'll get the bikes back out on the road, scuff in this tire once we can on the R9, and I'll give you guys some updates with that modification with the 190/55 as opposed to the 180/55. I'm looking forward to that a lot. And then from there, we'll just ride it around until, I don't know, maybe we decide to put cams in it, or maybe we decide we don't want to put cams in it because it's already so freaking good as it is. Oh, Pilo's saying, Google says 80 Newton meters or 59 pounds for the R9. Yeah, that's a lot more accurate than the shop manual. I'll tell you that for sure. But in saying all of that, hey, guys, appreciate y'all so much. Get out there and do something cool for somebody. Chances are they need it way more than you know. And I will hopefully catch you on the next one. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you. Oh, Plyo saying he's going to get a week of rain. Yeah, probably will get a week of rain. Weather. What can you do? Y'all take care.